The soft humming of fluorescent lights filled the grand federal courtroom in Washington, D.C., a place known more for whispers of deals than echoes of justice. On this crisp Monday morning, the air was especially tense. The crowd was thinner than usual, but each individual present bore a purpose: legal minds, political aides, and a few quiet journalists who sensed something big might unfold today. At the center of it all stood Tom Homan, the former acting director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, known for his no-nonsense attitude, loyalty to the law, and a deep disdain for the bureaucracy that had grown more political than principled. He had testified in front of Congress dozens of times, fought against the waves of chaos at the southern border, and earned both enemies and admirers alike. But today was different. Tom wasn't there as a witness, nor as a retired officer weighing in on policy. Today he was a man on a mission. A mission not to testify, but to expose. Across the room, presiding over the bench with the same self-assured smirk that had irked liberty-minded Americans for years, sat Judge James Boasberg. Appointed under the Obama administration and elevated to Chief Judge of the United States District Court for the District of Columbia, Boasberg had become a central figure in a wave of rulings that had quietly, and sometimes not so quietly, crippled law enforcement efforts, particularly in border security and immigration cases. Rumors had swirled for months about Boasberg's affiliations, secret meetings with left-wing NGOs, strange communications with Democratic donors, sealed court documents that were conveniently misplaced, and cases dismissed under the thinnest of pretenses. Homan had seen the wreckage up close. Families destroyed by cartels let loose. Human traffickers walking free because of a technicality. Agents under his command handcuffed by rules made in ivory towers with no knowledge of the front lines. But now he had something stronger than outrage. He had evidence. Tom's boots echoed as he approached the counsel table, documents tucked under his arm, his jaw clenched tight. To his left was a young federal attorney, a patriot named Elena Reyes, who had spent the past year collecting whistleblower testimonies and subpoenaed communications. She had once clerked under Boasberg. What she saw behind chambers' doors changed her life, and now she stood beside Homan, ready to bring the truth into the light. "Mr. Homan," Judge Boasberg began, not even hiding his disdain, "you've requested a hearing to present what you claim is significant evidence of judicial misconduct. You are not an attorney. Why are you here today?" Tom Homan stepped forward, placing the folder of sealed documents on the table. "With all due respect, Your Honor," Homan said, voice gravelly and direct, "I'm here because this nation's justice system is being held hostage by political actors wearing robes." Gasps trickled from the audience. Judge Boasberg's eyes narrowed. "I will not tolerate slander in this courtroom." "This isn't slander," Tom interrupted. "This is a reckoning." He opened the file. Inside, emails between Boasberg and known political operatives. Financial transfers from dark money packs. Meeting logs that contradicted the judge's sworn statements. Even photographs from a private fundraiser hosted by a radical activist group, where Boasberg was spotted giving what appeared to be guidance on upcoming immigration rulings. Boasberg's face turned a shade paler. "You have no jurisdiction to." Tom cut him off again. "You ruled against my agent's lawful detainments over 50 times. You freed cartel members citing rights violations without evidence. You dismissed a trafficking case with 15 underage victims because the lead investigator was too aggressive during questioning. Your courtroom has become a haven for political agendas, not justice." Silence fell like a hammer. Elena rose next, clicking a remote. Screens lit up around the courtroom. The images were damning: receipts, voice memos, even video from an anonymous whistleblower inside Boasberg's chambers. "This evidence has been submitted to both the DOJ and an internal ethics panel," she said clearly. "But those files were mysteriously delayed. So we're here, today, in front of the public, because truth doesn't wait for bureaucracy to catch up." Boasberg looked cornered. "This is outrageous." But before he could finish his sentence, the doors at the rear of the courtroom burst open. Four FBI agents stormed in, clad in dark suits, badges visible, expressions grim. The lead agent walked briskly down the aisle, a sealed federal order in hand. "Judge James Boasberg," the agent said, "by order of a special investigative panel under the Federal Judicial Integrity Task Force, you are being placed under administrative suspension pending further investigation into charges of corruption, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to defraud the United States." For a long, drawn-out second, Judge Boasberg sat frozen on the bench, as if disbelief might alter reality. His mouth twitched, but no words came out. The entire courtroom was silent, breathless. Tom Homan didn't move. He simply stared at the man who had once wielded unchecked power from behind the veil of judicial immunity. Now that veil was in tatters. The lead FBI agent, Special Agent Marcus Doyle, handed the printed suspension order to the clerk and spoke again, more forcefully. Judge Boasberg, I'm asking you to step down from the bench and accompany us. You are not under arrest yet, but we strongly advise cooperation. Boasberg tried to gather himself. This is a political stunt. You have no right. I'm a sitting federal judge. Agent Doyle didn't blink. We have a sealed warrant to seize communications from your personal and official devices. Our evidence was cross-verified by an internal task force led by DOJ Inspector General's office. You will not speak unless advised by your legal counsel. The courtroom erupted. Journalists dashed out, phones in hand, scrambling to break the story. Lawyers whispered frantically. A few audience members clapped, others, more cautious, quietly slipped out the doors. Boasberg stood slowly, his arrogance replaced with visible panic. You don't know what you're doing, he muttered, aiming it more at himself than anyone else. As the agents escorted the judge through the double doors, Elena turned to Tom. You sure this doesn't stop here? Tom looked back at the nearly empty bench. This was never just about Boasberg. The footage of Judge Boasberg being led out of his courtroom had already gone viral. News networks were airing split screens, one of Tom Homan presenting the evidence, the other of Boasberg, pale and shaken, ducking into a black SUV. Inside a private briefing room, Tom and Elena sat across from Congressman Reggie Thorne, a firebrand Republican from Texas who'd made it his mission to clean up corruption infecting every institution from the intelligence community to the judiciary. We've got a problem, Tom, Thorne said, voice low and urgent. Boasberg wasn't acting alone. I know, Homan replied. He was the gatekeeper. But there's a whole network behind him, from rogue prosecutors to NGO operatives laundering influence into federal courts. Thorne handed over a USB drive. Our investigation linked sealed rulings from Boasberg's court to case assignments influenced by Judge Vanessa Kearns in the Ninth Circuit. She's been moving dockets around, protecting certain defendants and stalling certain prosecutions, especially anything related to border trafficking. Elena leaned forward. It's like a shadow court system. Judges, lawyers, and bureaucrats playing hot potato with real cases while letting bad actors walk free. Thorne nodded. And if what you and Elena uncovered today holds, Boasberg is just the first domino. But we need to move fast. Once the network knows he's exposed, they'll start covering their tracks. Tom rubbed his forehead, thinking. We need the American people to see it, not just the legal case. The story. The faces. The victims. Elena added, we've got whistleblower testimony, victim impact statements, digital trails, financial records, but we need a platform. Not just some government press release. People have to feel what's really going on. Thorne smiled. I already got someone in mind. She's no stranger to exposing corruption, and she's got the biggest political talk show in the country. The broadcast cut in sharply. The background showed images of Judge Boasberg's arrest, Tom Homan's testimony, and side-by-side images of victims of cartel violence that had gone unpunished. Jenna's eyes burned into the camera. What you're witnessing, folks, is the collapse of the legal firewall protecting the deep state. Judge James Boasberg, long accused of throwing cases, shielding criminals, and abusing his bench, has been removed pending federal investigation. And it didn't come from Congress. It didn't come from the White House. It came from one man. The screen shifted to a live video feed of Tom and Elena sitting in studio. Tom Homan, Jenna said, you've just done what no one in Washington has had the guts to do. Tell us, how deep does this go? Tom, calm and unwavering, looked straight at the camera. We're looking at a systemic failure, Jenna. Judges like Boasberg used to be untouchable because nobody was brave enough to say it out loud. But justice has to be blind. It cannot serve politics. The rule of law isn't just a slogan. It's the foundation of this country. And I'm not going to stop until every last corrupted official is exposed. The audience watching at home, millions strong, were transfixed. Phone lines to Capitol Hill lit up. Hashtags surged. Protests formed overnight outside court buildings in New York, Los Angeles, and Atlanta. For the first time in years, a story had cut through the political noise and made people ask, who's really pulling the strings? The next morning, D.C. woke up like it hadn't in years, buzzing with accountability. The arrest of Judge Boasberg was splashed across every front page, from the Washington Post to the Federalist. But beneath the media frenzy, inside government buildings and elite law firms, something darker was stirring. Tom Homan knew it wouldn't take long. "They're going to come after us," Elena said bluntly, reviewing a long email chain filled with encrypted threats and veiled warnings. Tom stood by the window of a secure office loaned to them by Congressman Thorne's committee. Outside, Capitol Police had quietly doubled their patrol. "Let them," he replied. "We're not backing down." Within hours of Boasberg's removal, documents long buried in the judiciary system began to surface. Elena's encrypted database, compiled over months of tireless work, had red flags on nearly 24 federal judges, but the trail didn't stop at the bench. It led to a shadowy legal advocacy group known as the Justice Collective, publicly branded as a nonprofit supporting human rights, but in reality funded by offshore interests and domestic political operatives. They filed amicus briefs, influenced legal appointments, and funneled campaign contributions, all while positioning key allies into roles across DOJ divisions and federal courts. Tom stared at a chart projected on the screen, a spiderweb of judges, NGO operatives, PACs, and known political figures. "This is a legal cartel," he said. "They're not just protecting criminals. They're manufacturing outcomes." "And the lead strategist behind the Justice Collective?" Elena added, clicking to reveal the final connection. "Elliot Vance, former federal prosecutor. Once shortlisted for a federal bench position under the previous administration. Now he runs this empire from the shadows." Tom knew the name. Vance had been a golden boy in D.C. circles, slick, polished, always just on the edge of power but never exposed to risk. While Tom had been busting traffickers at the border, Vance had been playing chess with courtrooms and congressional committees. "We expose Vance," Tom said, "and this whole thing comes down like a house of cards." In the shimmering ballroom of a midtown hotel, Elliot Vance was holding court, smiling, sipping a $400 bottle of wine, pretending the scandal in D.C. didn't touch him. The attendees, lobbyists, attorneys, and big donors hung on his every word. "They think one judge goes down and the system crumbles?" Vance chuckled. "Boasberg was a pawn. Replaceable. The operation is too wide, too entrenched." But outside, a different kind of operation was unfolding. Tom, in coordination with FBI Special Agent Doyle, had secured an undercover team of agents. The FBI had already wiretapped the Justice Collective's communications after discovering encryption breaches and possible witness tampering linked to Vance's team. Inside the ballroom, an agent disguised as a young donor struck up conversation with Vance. Meanwhile, surveillance captured whispered conversations and coded language confirming everything: bribes, influence peddling, even jury tampering. Back in D.C., Elena coordinated with DOJ's Internal Integrity Division. "We have enough now," she told Doyle. "Wire evidence, whistleblower statements, even financial transfers from shell companies. Then we move on it," Doyle confirmed. "But it has to be big, coordinated. No leaks. No delays." At 7:45 a.m., FBI teams raided 4 Justice Collective offices in 3 different cities. Simultaneously, Elliot Vance was arrested outside his Manhattan apartment, stunned as reporters and federal agents surrounded him. The mugshot, suited, confused, disheveled, hit the internet within minutes. Tom stood in a temporary war room watching the feeds. 2 weeks ago, they thought they were untouchable. "They were," Elena replied. "Until we showed up." Backlash was immediate. The White House tried to remain neutral, but members of Congress across both parties demanded clarity. Political commentators exploded across the airwaves, some calling Tom a hero, others accusing him of targeting the judiciary. But the truth was out. Boasberg had been just the beginning. Vance, the architect, was now in custody. And the full scope of their network was unraveling before the public's eyes. The arrest of Elliot Vance sent a tremor through the political foundations of D.C. overnight. Formerly untouchable figures found themselves deleting encrypted chats, wiping hard drives, and calling in favors that hadn't been redeemed in years. The judicial elite had operated under a shroud of secrecy for too long. But now, that shroud was on fire. But with fire comes danger. Tom Homan received a message the next morning that stopped him cold. "Back off. Last warning. Accidents happen." It wasn't signed. It didn't need to be. Elena saw the text and didn't even flinch. "They're desperate," she said. "It means we're closing in." Tom nodded, but he wasn't about to take chances. Their security was increased. Thorne arranged for temporary protection from U.S. Marshals. Even Jenna Wallace, now using her media empire to track the fallout, received threats. But she doubled down. On that evening's broadcast, Jenna looked into the camera with unshakable fire. "Let me make something perfectly clear. You can try to intimidate Tom Homan. You can threaten whistleblowers. But this time, you're not fighting behind court doors or closed sessions. You're fighting in front of the American people. And they're watching." The story was no longer just a scandal. It had become a reckoning. Acting Attorney General Pam Bondi, brought back into the fold under the Trump administration for her grit and no-nonsense justice style, sat across from Tom, Elena, and FBI agent Doyle. Bondi laid out the files on the polished table. "We've officially opened a special counsel investigation into systemic judicial corruption. You two are now cooperating witnesses under full federal protection. But I want more than convictions," she said, locking eyes with Tom. "I want reform." Tom leaned in. "Then we start with court appointment protocols. No more sealed processes. No more lifetime protections without oversight. We create a judicial oversight board, bipartisan, transparent, and with the teeth to remove corrupted judges." Elena added, "And we strip the Justice Collective's IRS status. Their funding needs to be audited. We follow the money, and that's going to expose names no one's prepared for." Bondi cracked a rare smile. "Good, because we just got a lead that one of their donors sits on the Senate Judiciary Committee." Everyone went still. Agent Doyle broke the silence. "If this breaks the Senate." Tom didn't hesitate. "Let it." By now, the American people were fully tuned in. The House had scheduled an emergency bipartisan hearing to investigate what was now being referred to in the press as the Benchgate scandal. Protesters lined the streets, some chanting for full judicial reform, others accusing the entire system of betrayal. Tom Homan took the stand under oath. "I served this country my whole life," he began. "I've watched the criminal justice system bend for drug traffickers, ignore victims, and protect the powerful. All because judges, prosecutors, and private influencers were allowed to operate in the shadows. But this time, we followed the trail. We pulled back the curtain. And we're telling every American watching, this ends now." Gasps echoed as exhibits were introduced. Bank transfers, internal memos, signed orders from Boasberg and Kearns, even voice recordings of Elliott Vance discussing how to bury high-profile cases. Senator after senator sat in stunned silence, some visibly shaken as names they knew appeared in the evidence trail. When Elena took the stand, she dropped the final bombshell. "We have evidence that sitting federal judges collaborated with Vance to delay or sabotage border enforcement cases, including ones that allowed known traffickers to be released without trial." The committee chair nearly dropped her gavel. It wasn't just corruption. It was sabotage. Every American household had now heard the truth. From Texas ranchers to New York attorneys, people were seeing for the first time how deep the rot went. Churches prayed for justice. Veterans groups demanded reforms. Even school civics classes paused their curriculums to talk about what was happening. And something unprecedented began to rise. A unified movement. It wasn't red or blue. It wasn't left or right. It was American. People wanted justice, and they wanted it now. The sun rose over Washington, D.C., casting a golden glow on the Capitol dome. A symbolic moment of clarity after weeks of chaos. Inside the E. Barrett Prettyman Courthouse, a building that once shielded the powerful, now prepared to host the most watched trial in modern American history. The United States versus Elliott Vance and the corrupt members of the Justice Collective. Tom Homan sat quietly in the courtroom gallery, Elena beside him, both in dark suits, eyes locked forward. The room was packed. Victims of cartel crime, whistleblowers, senators, FBI officials, even journalists from around the world. America was watching justice walk in, not behind closed doors, not buried in paperwork, but out in the open. The prosecution laid it out with surgical precision. Evidence displayed on giant screens. Audio recordings, call logs, illegal wire payments, influence over federal dockets. Vance had his defense team elite, expensive, stone-faced. But no argument could spin what was clearly spelled out in data, wire transfers, and testimony. Tom was called to the witness stand again. This time, there was no tension, no fear, just clarity. "I don't care what your politics are," Tom said, his voice firm. "This isn't about red or blue. This is about law and order. It's about what kind of country we want to be. Do we want judges who take calls from shadow groups to protect criminals? Or do we want a justice system that lives up to its name?" He looked over at Vance, who kept his head down. "I didn't come here to be a hero," Tom continued. "I came because someone had to. And if that means facing every corrupt actor in this town, so be it." Applause broke out in the courtroom, brief but undeniable. Even the judge, now appointed from a special independent oversight list, didn't stop it. Elliot Vance was found guilty on all counts: conspiracy to obstruct justice, racketeering, judicial interference, and accessory to the trafficking crimes he helped bury. The sentence? 70 years in federal prison without parole. Other members of the Justice Collective were hit with lesser but still heavy sentences: 25 years for deputy directors, asset seizures, disbarment, permanent bans from lobbying or political consultancy. Several judges resigned. Some were indicted. Others were referred to internal review boards. The aftermath wasn't clean, but it was real. Under bipartisan pressure, Congress passed the Judicial Transparency and Integrity Act, one of the most significant court reforms in American history. The law mandated term limits for federal judges, mandatory financial disclosures updated annually, a new citizen-led judicial oversight board, restrictions on third-party amicus brief funding, independent review of sealed court documents. Tom was asked to speak at the bill's signing. "America doesn't become better by pretending we're perfect," he said at the podium next to President Trump and AG Pam Bondi. "We get better by standing up when things are broken and saying, 'We fixed this.'" Now, Elena was offered a role at the DOJ to head a new judicial integrity division, but she declined. "I've got other shadows to chase," she said with a wink. Tom returned to the border town of Del Rio, Texas. A new courthouse stood near the edge of town, its entrance etched with the words, "Justice without fear. Law without corruption." A local sheriff handed Tom a coffee as they stood on the courthouse steps. "You know," the sheriff said, "you didn't just clean up D.C. You cleaned up the whole damn country." Tom took a sip. "Didn't do it alone." "No," the sheriff agreed. "But you lit the fire." A group of kids passed by, pointing at the plaque with Tom's name below the new judicial oath of ethics. One boy turned to the sheriff and asked, "Is that the guy who put the bad judge in jail?" The sheriff grinned. "Son, that's the guy who told the whole system it couldn't hide anymore. It wasn't a perfect ending. Corruption never fully disappears. Power always finds ways to twist." But the balance had shifted. The American people had seen the truth, and they remembered who stood up for them. And somewhere in the heart of the country, a man named Tom Homan knew the fight wasn't over. But this round was won.